I also sent some news about, let's say, individuals whose companies or institutions were sanctioned by OFAC and were traveling to Canada, and their children were in Canada and are still in Canada. And how could have they brought money into this country without being noticed? Nobody cared. Nobody cared.
Let me move to I mentioned the EU and Canada, and this is something that you've talked about for a long time, about putting the IRGC on the terrorist list, and we go from broken telephone to the broken record here, because we keep talking about this, and for, I guess, to a certain extent, for some of us in the community, it seems like a no-brainer. I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, it seems like an obvious thing to do. And you still have the Canadian government quite incredulously dragging its feet on a full placing the IRGC on the terrorist list. And you have the EU with its president now coming out and saying, well, we need what was it, that we need some kind of legal decision that the IRGC is a terrorist group before we can move forward. I mean, the most really silly excuses to not move ahead with doing something like this. What is your take on what all this equivocation is about?
Look, a few weeks ago, a friend on Twitter sent me a link that it's a document from the government of Canada. And since 2010, I should say July 22nd, 2010, that this document has been registered. I'm just looking at it and I'll send it to you, through special economic measures on Iran, SOR /210/165. IRGC and the Basij have been sanctioned. How many people knew this? That from 2010, based on the consultants of the Privy Council, and I asked a number of legal experts that based on this, how could we have seen so many people connected to the IRGC actually
setting up shop in Canada,
traveling to Canada, right, setting up shop, thank you, and migrating to Canada, investing in Canada? We had one of the associates of Qasem Soleimani, a former minister now, living in Canada for years. And Qasem Soleimani had considered him our man in Canada. How could this have happened? And when we hear that in the drones that are killing people in Ukraine, you see parts from Bombardier, how did that happen? When you see lots of businesses, in a way, still active in Canada that are partially managed by the money that came through associates of the IRGC, the big question is that were the Canadian institutions aware or unaware of this? I believe that some people were unaware, but there were people that had noticed this matter. Look, in 2019, when I went to Parliament Hill and gave a statement about Iran's environmental crisis and talked about the impact of IRGC and what it's doing, and some people connected to and partnering with IRGC are in Canada, I also sent some news about, let's say, individuals whose companies or institutions were sanctioned by OFAC and were traveling to Canada, and their children were in Canada and are still in Canada. And how could have they brought money into this country without being noticed? Nobody cared. Nobody cared. So there is something wrong. The little guys suffer. The little guys like me, I'm not so little, of course. I'm around 250, 260 pounds, but people who are powerless have lots of problem in Canada with setting up bank accounts. Like Iranian Canadians had problems a couple of years ago, even if they had, if they've been living here for years. They couldn't, if somebody in their families lost their lives or they were going to get some of the inheritance, they really had problems getting that money. But how you hear that people are investing and migrating to Canada, bringing millions and millions of dollars.
What's your answer to that? I mean, at this stage, maybe in 2019 you could get the government could get away with inaction, but at this stage, what and it's funny because they say all the right things, that out there shouting, the prime minister and others, but this action. What is really at stake here that is preventing putting the IRGC on the terrorist list? And I would add the same thing for Europe.
Look, the thing is, some people have gained from that money, for sure. As Deep Throat in the famous Watergate story used to say, "Follow the money."
Right.
That's a big question, and unfortunately, we don't see investigative journalists doing their jobs anymore these days. That is sad.